We've all been through the ringer when it comes to engaging with services to get the support our kids need. That's probably why you're here. You've probably had these experiences yourself. I know I have. My last video, which has just gone live today when we're recording this, is all about that. The fact that we've had to engage with services, that the support we need hasn't been there until now. And it's a frustration so many parents, so many carers know. And today I had the chance to speak to the wonderful Michaela Silsby, who has essentially written an open letter to the government, to those who need to be doing their jobs and supporting our kids. Michaela, welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. It's fantastic to meet you and to really delve into this. Now, obviously, basically, I got tagged in the post that you put up on Facebook, which was this open letter. Can you tell me what's led to this? What's been your experience so far? And I mean, I guess a bit of your family history and why this is important for you guys.
Yeah, so well, my eldest daughter, Sahara, she was diagnosed with autism, ADHD, with a PDA profile back when she was 7, and she's nearly 15 now. And, all through kind of primary school, she was really, really well supported. And, by supported, it was just those really little things, that she needed to run to the tree every kind of half an hour. It was very simple. She just couldn't sit still. That very typical kind of doesn't know how to sit still, can't keep her hands to herself. And it was all of those little things, which in primary school, we didn't even realize that we're going to be sort of, become so important, because they were just allowed to happen in primary school. They were amazing, accommodating for her needs. And if she needed a wobble cushion for her chair, no problem, you can have one. If she needed to step outside, or if she didn't want to participate in an activity, that was fine. And it was very well catered for in primary school. And then she went up to secondary education, and things started off quite well. The first kind of couple of months, she handled the transition amazingly, which shocked all of us, because we were kind of waiting for that explosion to happen of,
Yeah.
oh, I can't cope. And we've kind of made the school aware that she'd obviously got a diagnosis and she might need support, and we kind of made them aware of what things we would like putting in place. And we were kind of told, yes, that's absolutely fine. And so she started back in secondary school, and it was just a downward spiral really from then. It took months and months of me going in for meetings, and every time I went in, there was this lack of communication. And they told me that they hadn't received the diagnosis papers I'd sent in. They told me they hadn't received anything from the primary setting. And, all the while I'm thinking, but I've brought these in, I have brought these in myself. And then we kind of had a couple of incidents where Sahara had been kind of picked on by other students, and she'd not handled it how they'd imagined a child should handle it. She'd just kind of lost her mind a little bit, and hadn't reacted in how they deemed appropriately. And then I had a phone call from the head of pastoral, to which she said to me, Sahara responded in a way that wasn't, typical. And I said, well, you do realise that she's autistic and she has ADHD, and she's not going to respond to a situation where she feels threatened in a typical way. And this was 6 months into secondary. And she said to me, no, I don't know what you're talking about. I haven't seen any documentation to say Sahara's autistic. So straight away, that really struck me as, she's been here for 6.5 months, and you're now telling me that you don't have any paperwork. And I'd been in for SEND meetings, I'd been in for coffee mornings to try and get things in place. And still at this point, we had, they were none the wiser to the fact that my child was really starting to struggle. So then again, we were reassured that, okay, now we know this, we're going to put things in place for her, and we'll make sure that she's dealt with in a way that is kind of, I guess, neuroaffirming, rather than just treating her like a neurotypical child and chucking her into an isolation room. So things just escalated, from that point onwards. There was another incident where a child had pulled on Sahara's coat in the hallway, and they pulled her to the floor. And she then reacted to that got up, she turned around and she'd swung for this other child because she'd ended up on the floor. And so again, I got a phone call to say at 2 o'clock in the afternoon to say Sahara had been in isolation since 9:30 that morning when the incident occurred. And so obviously I'd gone to pick Sahara up from school, and she got in the car and completely broke down. And she explained to me that she'd been in isolation all day. She'd had one worksheet to look at. So again, I contacted the school the following morning, and again, I was met with, we are not aware that your child is supposed to be on the SEND register.
I was not aware of that.
Okay, right. Once I kind of, I can put down to lack of communication, you give them the benefit of the doubt to some extent. And, we know that schools are busy places. There's lots of children in mainstream that need different kind of things putting into place. And so at this point, I'd kind of, without swearing, I just lost my mind a little bit on the phone.
You can swear away. It's okay.
And I said to them, she's been here 7 months and I've had 3 meetings with the SENCO and I've been in for other meetings, and you're now telling me that the rest of her Sahara school teachers don't know that she is autistic and has ADHD. How many more times am I going to need to bring in the paperwork? So again, I photocopied all our paperwork, I took it back down, and it was just incidents like that. We'd gone in and I'd asked for calm cards, I'd asked for, adjustments to her uniform, and I'd asked for her to be able to have movement breaks. And at this point, she was really dysregulated when she'd come home. She'd broken her hand when she'd come home from school from punching the wall because she was so frustrated with a piece of homework that she'd been set, and they'd given her a detention for not completing it. But actually, it turns out there was a miscommunication there, and she shouldn't have received the detention because the homework was set for like 2 days later. And so she'd felt really kind of, I guess, that injustice of, you've given me this detention and I don't know what for. So that resulted in a broken hand. And that's when things really kind of came to light, because I'd phoned the school and said, she's in the hospital. They'd said she needed surgery on her knuckles, so she wasn't due to be back at school for a few days. And that's when the push really started, that, okay, well, she needs to be back in school. And I'm saying, I understand that completely, but she needs to be sorted out. She can't rush back in. She's had a real tough week. She's broken her hand. She needs to get fixed up, and she'll be back in when she's ready. And then when she had gone back in, I'd made them aware that she couldn't fit her school blazer over her cast. So she'd gone back into school with what they said was okay, was just a plain black jumper, because it was October, so it was cold and she needed something. So she'd kind of gone back in, and over the course of the next 5 weeks, she was pulled aside by all different teachers, the head teacher included, asked on a daily basis why she didn't have her blazer on. And I'd said, I'd sent probably about 12, 13, maybe more emails notifying them as to why. And it was plainly obvious why she didn't have the blazer. Yeah. So why they would even question it was beyond me anyway. So that had kind of gone on for about 4 or 5 weeks. And then she'd got the all clear the first morning that she'd gone back into school. It was a Monday. The hospital had given her the all clear. They'd taken her cast off. She was really happy. She was buzzing that she could go back to school. And I think she felt lighter because she was like, nobody's going to question me now, and I can carry on with my day. So her dad had dropped her back into school, and this was at 10 o'clock. She'd arrived in the school building from a hospital appointment. And at 11:15, I had a phone call while I was at work that Sahara had been chased down a set of stairs by a teacher who was questioning her as to why she didn't have her blazer on. Because obviously she'd come from the hospital to the school, so she didn't have her blazer with her. But in my head, I was like, let's just get you there. It's important that you're back in school. So let's not go home and get the blazer. It doesn't matter. They'll understand. But, that was just so silly of me, obviously. So she's gone back in, she's been followed, and then resulted in she'd gone into a full meltdown, and she had tried to run away from the teacher. She tripped and fell down 2 flights of stairs.
Jeez.
Then she was seen by first aid, and obviously autistic children don't feel pain quite like typical children. And
The sensory
Sahara,
processing issues, then it's the brain doesn't necessarily register pain in the same way. If you, yeah, absolutely.
yeah, and so she'd fallen down this flight of stairs, and first aid had come to her on the stairwell, and she didn't suggest that they look at her leg. She just said it felt funny. So first aid didn't look. They didn't even think, in my head, I'm thinking, like, that's an autistic child. I'm going to have to say, I need to have a look at your leg, because they're not going to think that, they're not going to understand. They're too busy processing what's happening. But no, she was made to walk back to her next lesson, and her friend had to help her down the flight of stairs. And then she almost passed out in her next lesson. So the teacher for that lesson had a look and realised that her tibia bone was bent almost in half, and said,
Whoa.
"Oh, Sahara, we need a wheelchair." So then that required fixation with screws. And then that then snowballs us into the next marathon of failings that had happened. And it's all just been one thing after another. There's not been an ounce of communication. Nobody's communicated with us. Nobody's communicated with her. And nobody's taken the time to try to understand her on that level of, yes, on the outside, she comes across as very confident, and she can be loud. She can be bubbly.
She's a PDA. Yeah.
Yeah, but she's absolutely cannot cope in these situations of that environment of being at school. So yeah, that's kind of where we got to the point where, she was then out of school for a few weeks because of the operation she'd had on her leg, which led her to kind of, we'd asked for kind of home learning because Sahara didn't feel comfortable going into school with obviously a nice new screw in her leg. And then it just kind of showed us that really highlighted for us the lack of adjustments they were willing to make. It was no at every turn. We needed home learning. We needed accessible kind of one level lessons without having to go up and down the stairs. Sahara didn't feel comfortable. They did have a lift for obviously wheelchair users, but you know what it's like if you've got a PDA child. They don't want to look different to everybody else. They want to blend in, and there was absolutely no telling Sahara. But there also wasn't no telling the school. So we were stuck in this kind of cat and mouse. They wanted her back in school ASAP, but Sahara, the more they kind of pushed, the more she then pulled away.
Because they're creating an immense demand. And if, PDA understanding, that's obviously going to result in denial. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, that was kind of what highlighted for us, okay, right, this is going to be a problem. So, yeah, we kind of went from there, and I did eventually get her back into school in the January. So this happened in the October. I finally got her to go back in the January, and kind of convinced her, let's just try, because they're promising me that they're going to put everything into place for you. It's all going to be there. So you're going to have access to all these calm cards you need, the movement breaks, the toilet breaks. And in my head the whole time I'm going, why these things need permission anyway is beyond me. But so she'd kind of got it all signed off, and on paper it looked absolutely brilliant. Yes, let's do this. So she turned up to school on the first day with her. She still had her boot on, but she was in for a long road of recovery. So it was kind of like, you need to just go back with your boot on and just try and see how you go. We'd asked for reduced hours, and they said the best they could do was it would be okay if she finished at lunchtime. I kind of just said to Sahara, let's just trial it for a couple of days and let's see how it goes, how you're feeling, and you let me know, if it's too much. And so she'd done that for a few days, and on the third day, she asked to use her calm card and was denied it again, which obviously led to her being removed from the lesson because she'd walked out of the lesson because they'd said, you can't use it. It was this constant, every day she was told, you can use it, you've got a safe space to go to. And there was nothing, when she was in school, these things were not happening. And then she would obviously come home and she would be in a state. And then eventually over time, her trust just diminished to nothing. And I then felt like I was lying to her, because I'd have these meetings and then I'd say to her, but maybe it'll be different this time, Sahara, you know, please, can you try? And bless her heart, she tried so hard to keep pushing and keep going in. But every time she was met with every reason not to try. And, you know, there was just no adjustments made for her. She was left in isolation rooms. She was told she had a safe space. And then when she tried to use it, they would tell her that she wasn't allowed to. So she would end up walking around the school building. But then she would be punished for walking around the school building. So it's kind of like, okay, I'm not really sure what else she's supposed to do. And when she's in that frame of mind, she's kind of fight or flight, and she can't make a kind of executive decision at that point, because she's already going, I just need to get out of this situation and I need to get somewhere that's safe. They never really grasped that concept at all. Her biggest thing was always, she has to be left alone. If she's about to go into meltdown, she will say, leave me alone.
Leave me alone, please leave me alone.
She's remarkable in itself that she's that self-aware, that she's able to communicate, I need a break right now and I need to be alone. That's, I mean, that's credit to you that she's able to communicate that.
Yeah. And, you know, and we'd always said that to them, like, please listen, because when she gets to that point, you're about to lose her. But if you give her that time and space, she will bring herself back from it. She just needs time. So they'd say to me, well, how long? And I'd say, well, I can't put a time frame on it. You know, sometimes it's 5 minutes, sometimes it can be 5 hours. Like, you know, how long?
It's how long's a piece of string, isn't it? It really does come down to that kind of thinking. It's the, the expectation that, okay, well, we can assign 7.5 minutes because that's the, you know, that's ridiculous.
Yes,
The
absolutely.
understanding that clearly within the school of neurodivergence and particularly autism and PDA seems like it's really lacking.
Yeah.
What have you tried to do to, I guess, challenge this since? Like, you've gone through all this, you've had this experience. Poor Sahara's struggling massively with her life, with school. I can only imagine the impact that's having on her mental health at this stage.
Yeah. Yeah.
Especially when you combine the physical injuries that have been incurred through this. I mean, what's that been like for her?
So she's been out of school since October last year. So she managed to go back January last year. She went back, and she's done in total last year probably about 12 days of school. And in September of last year, she went up into year 9, and she said to me, Mum, I think I feel ready to try and go back. And I said to her, I said, if that's totally up to you, you know, at this point, because of her mental health, you know, she had spouts where she'd stayed in bed for weeks at a time. She couldn't get out of bed. The only time she would get out of bed was to come down and have something to eat. And I was having to not force her, but I was having to really, really encourage her to, you know, you need to shower. You need those typical kind of burnout, and, you know, and
Shut down, essentially.
Yeah, she stopped doing everything. She used to play football. She used to go out all the time with her friends, and that all stopped. And only in the last kind of, I'd say 3 months, has she started to come back to herself. But yeah, she hasn't been in school since October last year, because she tried to go in the September, like I say, and she started year 9, and she did 2 days, and again it started again. You know, she wasn't allowed to use these calm cards, she wasn't allowed to leave the classroom, and then she was chased outside of the building on this occasion, and she jumped over a 7-foot gate to try and get away from the teacher. And I just so happened to be pulling up to the school and see this happen.
Wow.
And I've just seen my child just go straight over, and she gave herself concussion that day because she jumped and obviously hadn't prepared herself. And it was weird because I'd gone to the school that day because I just had this feeling that something wasn't right. I'd had a very strange text message from her from the toilets, and I just thought, no, I'm going to head there. Something doesn't feel right. And so I turned up and listened into her tracker app on her phone, and I could hear the surroundings. That's all I can listen into. And in that, I could hear her screaming, please leave me alone. Please stop following me. So I'm thinking, okay, she's being very clear. She's being very, forward with her, what she's asking for. And then I see the teacher following her, and Sahara's just running to this gate, and I'm thinking she's going over. And she did. She jumped straight over. And then that obviously led to the next spout of kind of absence, because then she was like, well, they've shown me on my third day back that nothing has changed and that I'm still not allowed to use the things I need to use in school. And so I did eventually, again, we went in for more meetings, and again, I was reassured. This time it's going to be different. So we went back in the November, and on her second day back into school, she was set upon by a student in the year group, a boy who proceeded to sit on top of her and punch her in her face until he near enough broke her nose. There was video footage of all of this, and I've had to see that. And the police did nothing. They said there wasn't enough evidence. The school did nothing. In fact, they told me that if Sahara could manage to come back in, she may face going into isolation for the day because she fought back and she punched this boy back. And I was just like, I couldn't process myself what I was being told after the footage I had seen of my child. And it absolutely broke me and made me feel physically sick having to watch a video of my child just defenseless, on the floor, and there's not a teacher in sight, there's nobody around, and it's only because another student came and pulled this boy off of her that he stopped punching her in the face. And this happened because he thought that she didn't look like a girl. That was the only reasoning. And it just, so since then she hasn't been able to go back in. And obviously after that was like my final, you are not safe there, you are not going back. So she's been home since then, and say it's taken months of just, I've had to back all the way off. There's been absolutely no pressure to learn at home. There's had to be nothing, we've had to just strip it right back. I've had to just let her heal from all of that. And say she spent about 3 months just in her bedroom, in her bed, and she didn't want to see her friends. She hasn't been to football. She's not done anything apart from just try to survive. And she's had horrible thoughts. She's been through the mill with her mental health has taken a massive hit. She's said things to me that have upset me because I lost my dad to suicide. And so hearing Sahara say those words really triggers me in a whole new kind of level. But that's how she felt, that's how it made her feel.
I can genuinely relate. We've had similar expressions from my daughter recently, and it goes, I mean, it's so hard, especially as parents. I mean, these are, our kids are the most important things in the world to us.
Yeah.
And we see them struggling like that. It's beyond just anything. How's this affected you? I mean, this is the thing. I think what often gets misunderstood in this is that it seems like, yes, the system is failing a person.
Yeah.
But it's not. It's failing so many more people. I mean, how's this impacted you and your family?
Oh, it's impacted everything. Yeah. I mean, I have had to stop working because obviously Sahara's needed me here. She's needed constant, almost, I almost feel like we've reverted back to having a 1-year-old where I can't leave her unsupervised. I can't not trust her, but because of her state of mind, I am too afraid to leave her. My partner's had to take time out of work to attend all these meetings with me and to try and support me because it's just so much on my head all of the time. I actually ended up in hospital 3 times last year because I had all these really horrendous symptoms of different things, and they couldn't find any root cause for sort of any straightforward answer other than just chronic stress. And it was just like being in survival mode, you know, getting through one day to then have to do it all again the following day. And I mean, Sahara's younger sister, Mia, I mean, bless her, I think she's gained trauma just from having to see what her sister has been through. It's taken a toll on everybody, and the financial hit, you know, to the house, because I can't now work, and my children will come above anything. Money doesn't matter, but it is a factor in this kind of, you know, in this problem that we all seem to know so much about now. And I just think that kind of gets overlooked because it's like, well, your mum's at home with you, so you're okay. And it's like, but we can't provide what we need to provide.
It's such a short-sighted perspective, because clearly a more professional clinical approach is needed, especially when you're dealing with that level of mental health impact. This is trauma of the most, you know, egregious kind. I used to get bullied at school quite badly, and the trauma of that lasted with me for decades. I see it so often, and that alone, any kid. So I'm a neurotypical. I don't have, you know, I'm the boring one in my family. Everyone else is neurospicy. I'm the neurotypical boring one. But you know, as a neurotypical, that had a profound traumatic effect on me right through adulthood. So what she's been experiencing just from that bullying aspect alone must be humongous. But when the institutions that are supposed to be supporting you, listening and acting on this stuff aren't doing so, that's really scary.
Yeah.
I'm guessing that's what led to this open letter.
Yes. So we have July last year, we were told countless times that Sahara wouldn't be entitled to an EHCP because she wasn't disabled enough. So obviously I kind of looked into it a few times, and I just kept thinking, I never lost that sight of, she needs something more than what they can provide. So I'm going to look into this. I'm going to try. So I did a parent referral to kind of assess for an EHCP. And just on the amount of emails and evidence that I had, they agreed to assess for an EHCP. And so we got that through, we got that finalised in April of this year, with her new school setting named on it. So we're thinking, yes, this is a fresh start, you know, and they'd put all in her EHCP, you know, she needs to have trauma-informed staff working with her. She needs to have people who understand what she's been through. So I'm thinking, oh my goodness, wow, this is a massive step forward. I've got it for you. And it's all been worth all this hard work. It's been worth it. But that was on the 30th of April this year, we got that through. And we still don't have a start date. We still have no idea when she's going to be starting. We've had no transition. And all I keep getting is radio silence from the local authority, from the school setting itself. I just keep getting sent round and round in circles. And I sat one evening and I just thought, this is happening. And it's not just happening to me. I know it's happening to others. I just got really peed off. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to write down in the simplest way that I can everything that has ticked me off. And as I was writing it, it kind of came out as a letter. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to chuck it on my page and just see what happens. And here we are at nearly 3,000 shares later. and it's been amazing, because for me, I felt so alone and I felt so isolated, and I'd been made to feel like I was the only person that had a kid that was having these issues and these problems. And so for all those people,
it's the feedback I hear from parents and carers more than anything, is that sense of isolation. And we've been through a very tough year ourselves, and I've felt that, even with all my, you know, the supposed knowledge and all this kind of stuff I've got, I have felt the sense of that isolation, because it restricts you in so many ways. Because just having people in my home will be an issue for my daughter, and so you know, having a friend over might not be the right thing at the moment. And there's been a lot of that kind of juggling. I think it was incredibly brave to put that out there the way you did. And so, I mean, the story you shared today, there's a real bravery in that. And I really want to applaud that.
Thank you.
I'm going to link in the description to this, that particular post, so people go out and share it and share away, and let's try and make this as loud as possible. We need to, to sort of head toward wrapping this up in in a positive way, I guess, is what do you think is needed
Yeah.
from your experience? What is needed to change people's perspective, especially these institutions which are supposed to be there safeguarding and looking after our kids?
Yeah.
You know, and I want to state as well, this isn't an attack on teachers. This is an attack on schools.
Yeah.
This is a particular situation within a particular school, and I can name many schools that are doing a fantastic job. And I mean,
Yes. Yeah.
Michaela herself has said the primary school were fantastic. This has been since this transition. What do you think needs to change?
I honestly think to make these, not just my child, you know, for any kind of neurodivergent children to be able to cope in mainstream, I honestly feel that the whole system is far too rigid. We've got behaviour policies. There's a policy for everything,
Yep.
except for the children that can't follow the policies. So we need to strip it back. Let's have a relaxed environment. What we're trying isn't working at the moment, and children are dropping out of education so fast. So why can't we, you know, go for the opposite now? Let's try a relaxed approach. Let's put some trust in these kids that they want to learn.
This is it. And I think it comes back to this. I mean, it's been my sort of trope for so many years now doing this. We've got to stop trying to change the kids, we change neurodivergent people to fit in a world that isn't suited for them. We need to start adapting the world to make this a welcoming place. And if that's adapting a school policy, that's the whole point of an EHCP. It's a legally binding document. If they're not adhering to the things that were contained within that EHCP, there's a legal problem.
Yeah.
The fact that your daughter's been injured on school grounds on multiple occasions due to this, to me, is like that.
Yeah.
That seems like, you know, ripe for legal pursuits and kind of stuff. That's not me recommending that or anything like that. But like, seriously, if I was in their position, I'd be doing everything in my power to cover my ass right now.
Yeah. Exactly.
We've got to start changing the world to adapt to these people, because we need these people in our world. And I've talked about this many times, you know, the impact that neurodivergent people have on the discoveries and the advances we've made as a human race are astonishing. We need these people. We need their input. We need their perspective. And yet we seem to be hell-bent on dehumanizing and reducing these people to just statistics.
Yeah. Yeah. And I honestly feel that by making the school environment more inclusive for neurodivergent children and, you know, teachers as well.
Yeah.
I do honestly feel like that's only going to have positive effects for everybody, and not just the neurodivergent children and teachers. It's going to have a positive impact for, you know, just generally feeling better about being in an environment makes you want to do more. If you can focus and you're happy to be somewhere. And one of my biggest things has always been children don't deny themselves access to somewhere that brings them joy. And kids, like, she loves learning and she would give anything to be at school, but she just can't cope when she gets through those doors. So I just think we need to be flexible, and we need to be willing to make changes that might not seem of your average kind of Joe, but do you know what we're doing isn't working, so let's change it up and let's see what happens. Let's try all these things at least to just see if there's a positive outcome.
I think that's it. And it comes back to the Einstein quote, isn't it? If you're constantly evaluating a fish on its ability to climb a tree, it's always going to fail. So let's start looking at how we can support and encourage. You know, Jimmy Carr did a fantastic interview, which I put on here before. I'll find it again.
School teaches us a lesson about mediocrity and being all-rounders. And yet we live in a world that does not reward all-rounders. Who gives a fuck about all-rounders? If you get a D in physics and you get an A in English, I say just go to English lessons, because we're going to get you up to a C grade in physics. I'll tell you what the world doesn't need: someone who's shit at physics. You know, so find out what you've kind of got a natural, you know, that edge thing. Find out what you have a natural ability for. What's the thing that you do best? And again, I would remind people, it's not the best in the world, just better than anything else you do. Lean into that.
It's such a brilliant example of the approach that we're taking is wrong for so many.
Yeah. And I find it so hard. Like, Sahara's very, very good with her hands, and she's really, really good at, you know, mathematician. She's amazing, but she can't write a story to save her life.
No.
Because she doesn't see the point in it. There's no kind of literal point to it. And that always broke me. You know, we got constant reminders of, oh, Sahara's not handed this in, she's not handed that in. But there was never any applause for the fact that she'd passed her mental maths quiz with 100%.
That's it.
And it was always on the negatives. And I just think, you know what, she needs praise. PDA kids thrive off of that.
Thrive on it. Yep.
You know?
It's nuts. If you've been experiencing these kind of things, please do share it with us. Put it in the comments, reach out to me, reach out to Michaela. I'm sure she'd be
Yeah.
happy to give her 10 cents worth as well. There are support networks out there. I will highly recommend the PDA Society. They are fantastic at giving support. SENDIAS, every area has its local form of this. It's the SEND Information Advisory Service. They are very good at giving you details on your rights, what you're able to get, right down to the financial impact this can have and what services and what benefits are available to you, which is a dirty word at the moment, the word benefits, but they're there for a reason. And if you've had to stop working because your kid can't function at school and you've got to be there to care, that's a reasonable request, you know, in my opinion, and I'm sure most people's opinion. Michaela, I want to thank you so much for joining me and telling your story. It's just been heartrending, but fabulous that you've been so open and courageous in sharing it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, because for a long time I was worried that it become normal, you know, and you become numb to that. And so it's refreshing speaking with people who understand and who just get it. To just be able to offload that, and for you to sit there and say, I understand, and that's enough for me to help me.
And that's, I mean, that's the beauty. There is a community out there, and it's, you'll have heard this on my channel before, people, but I call it Hogwarts, because it's this invisible world that nobody knows exists until you're thrust into it. And suddenly there's all these people who are wanting to help, who've been through it and are sick and tired of seeing the same shit come up every single day, every single week, every single month, every single year. You know, change needs to happen. Please do get behind Michaela. As I say, do go. I'll put the link in for her post in the description. Share it. Get it to the ears that need to hear it. Get it to our governments. Get it to our parliaments. Get it to our local authorities, the people who need to make this difference, to our schools. Let's make this a platform for change. Let's not let Michaela and Sahara's story be something that is just another statistic. This could be the starting point for real change.
Let's hope so. Right.
Fantastic. Yeah, exactly. Please do go and subscribe to my channel. I know it's one of those things that every YouTuber says, but it really does make a difference to how this message gets out. And that's all I care about. I don't make money from this channel. It is all about amplifying people's voices on this stuff. So it really does help if you hit subscribe, hit like, and even make a comment. I will see you again on the next episode. In the meantime, please do stay safe.